Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow. Welcome to another edition of Tech Interviews. So on this week's show, we're going to be kind of dipping into the world of infrastructure modernisation, and this time with a specific focus on the world of networking, looking at kind of network simplification, network automation, and how really to deliver modern networking to meet the demands of today's enterprise, I guess, so because I think in a lot of cases we still spend a lot of our time when it comes to networking looking at the way we've traditionally done networking and wonder how we make it work in this kind of modern world. So that's the topic of this week. I think it's a really interesting topic, and it's something that came about from kind of a chance meeting actually with the company that my guest this week works for, and I think they're doing some really interesting stuff in this space. So I wanted to share that with the Tech Interviews audience. So that's what we're going to do, and so to help me to do that, I'm joined by Rich Martin. Hi, Rich.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
No, you're welcome. Good to have you here. And we've been discussing some of our technical recording challenges because, as you can see, Rich is a possessor of a mighty fine green screen. So we've been sharing some notes. My green screen's over there for people who know my Loftus, the little space that I do the show from. But we're not going to talk about that. You'll all be pleased to know. So before we do start, though, Rich, why don't we take a minute, find out a little bit about who you are and what it is you do.
Sure. Rich Martin, Senior Technical Marketing Engineer at Intential. That gives me the distinct pleasure of speaking with customers, potential customers, and folks like yourself, podcasts, different industry events about what Intential does, how we do it. And especially in the world of networking, my past comes from a network engineer with a little bit of a programming background that spans, back into the 90s. So what we do at Intential is really, it hits home as part of one of my distinct pain points going through my career of how do you automate networking. And so being at Intential gives me some ability to put that to rest and show people how this is going to be done now.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting that you kind of pulled that up yourself, because at the moment you said that, I made a note here of that kind of programming background, because that's a hugely important part of the way that we're deploying modern infrastructure. I think completely. And today we're going to focus on networking, but we were talking before we started recording about how I'm seeing that kind of in my day-to-day role in data management, how we see that in application modernization, and it's in the importance of this kind of automation and simplification space. But so maybe to start, why don't we set the scene for folk, because obviously not everybody watching this show, listening to this show is spends all their time in networking. So what's kind of the market look like today in terms of networking, and what are some of the challenges that you're seeing enterprises having to deal with that kind of makes it ripe for us to look at modernizing the way we deal with networking?
Okay, that's a great. Even if your audience isn't intimately familiar with the nuts and bolts of networking, they can surely identify with having maybe a slow process in getting networking going, right? So if they're part of a team that's deploying an application, unfortunately, typically the network has been a bit of a bottleneck. We can get all this stuff done because of automation or virtualization, but we get to the networking piece and you hit this brick wall. And sometimes you wonder, why is there a stop here? Everything else in technology is moving forward and can spin up and spin down on demand, it seems. Well, what's going on with networking? Well, an interesting question. And so to really talk about the challenges, you have to understand that networking hasn't moved as fast in the world of automation. And I've lived through it, so I know I feel it distinctly personally. But here's the good news. The good news is that we're now starting to see the development of some really great tools, both open source, so for the kind of the do-it-yourself minded folks, and commercial tools and platforms. And so the current state of networking and the challenges is how do we take this network, which has actually grown more and more complex, over time, especially in the last 5-6 years, and complexity in terms of not just where networking specifically lies. You can identify data center networking is a specific type, or branch office networking is a specific type. So we've seen this networking kind of compartmentalize in a sense, and within those compartments, those distinct domains of networking, there are new tools and controllers, right? So this has driven complexity through that. And so there's also this need for more networking. Um, think about how easy it is to spin things up, whether it's an on-prem cloud or a public cloud. There's this idea like, why can't we spin up networking, right? And so there's this great demand for more and more networking resources and services, but without the tools to be able to address that, that's where the challenge is. And so this has been a growing challenge for some time now, but I think it's been accelerated with the pandemic. We're seeing networking teams who are struggling to do the most basic of tasks because of just natural growth of networking and resources now have to shift and do other things and grow other parts of the network, like remote access for users. We have to grow that infrastructure on the on a dime. We've got to turn on a dime and accelerate that. And then how do you do that as well as deal with all the other things that are going on in your, I won't say legacy network, but in the network they're already aware of and they're already taking care of. And so there's complexity, there's more and more systems, there's more and more demand, and then there's very little that's been going on in network automation, both in strategy and tooling and skill set. And so we've seen a huge acceleration in this problem just in the last 6-7 months.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually one of the questions as you were talking that I made a note of was this idea of, have you seen the nature of networking and the need to find new ways of managing and delivering change rapidly over, because the network itself, it feels, well, it has, I mean, it doesn't just feel like it, does it? The network itself has changed massively over the last kind of, throughout 2020. Let's talk about in terms of COVID response. There's that's
Sure.
the elephant in the room. We may as well mention it. So rather than just having his trunk poking the way, it's the, but I think that idea that networking, not only has the network complexity changed, but the demands have moved as well. So the idea that our network demands were focused on maybe kind of these concentrated hubs of users. Well, those hubs no longer exist in lots of instances. Those hubs have gone from, I use the same figure every time. It's no longer 1,000 people in a head office. It's 1,000 head offices with one person in.
Right.
And it's what does that, what is the impact of that when it comes to managing networks and delivering, delivering technology effectively. So that sounds like the kind of thing that you've seen hugely yourselves over this year. And so have you seen? Is that kind of is that demand inside of the enterprise changing as rapidly, or is it taking some people by surprise? Are people still trying to solve this problem traditionally? And if they are trying to solve it traditionally, what challenges is that presenting them with?
So great questions. Is it taking them by surprise? I think in a sense, yes, because I think some of the idea that enterprise IT teams and especially networking teams were up against was, hey, we'll get there. We've got some runway in this. We'll get to the network automation piece. We've got some other strategic things going on. The networks are just the pipes, and so we'll get there. That's rapidly changing, and I think good in a sense because it's made people not only more aware of the problem, but thinking, hey, networks are critical. Networks aren't just pipes. In a sense, they are, but especially as we're moving more services and more applications to the cloud, like you said, you can't define a delineation, a demarcation of where your users are that's nice and clean. And networking folks they'd love to have a demarcation point and say, here's where all my users are, right? This is the domain. Now it's just spread across everywhere. Your applications now could be in multiple clouds, and you still need some. And here's what's interesting about that is once you start services into the cloud, one part of that complexity is those network services are very different from the networking devices and how they operate. So not only how you manage them, but how you operate them, how you troubleshoot them is completely different. And this is a huge challenge for networking teams. And so they're being forced now to be able to deploy new services to take advantage of things like cloud native networking, expanding that. And some of them are doing it themselves. Some of them are investing in platforms. Ideally, we want to support both, and we do support both. But I think any solution needs to take a look at a couple of things. Number one, what networking teams typically look at is how do we solve a very specific task, right? Because if you're looking at the network engineer, he's got a backlog of a particular task that he's just trying to get off his plate. And a lot of times it's a very highly repeatable thing. And so there are a lot of tools in, open source, Python, all kinds of things out there that help you automate maybe a particular task. But what you find quickly, and maybe this is something that's not so obvious to teams that are getting engaged in the network automation world, is that the task only buys you a particular advantage in time savings and things like that. You quickly learn that there's more to network automation than just that task. There are other systems you must integrate with, or you should integrate with to take the most advantage of it, or other networking domains. And so what becomes maybe something simple in a do-it-yourself mentality, hey, if I could just automate these changes to this particular data center set of ports, you do gain some advantage here. That's great. But then I think what they realize is like, hey, there's more to be had here. But now, since the network is so complex, I have to spend more time perhaps learning how to write code to interact with all these systems, to data between all of them, to finally do the network automation that I need to do. And that's one of the challenges that they need to understand as part of this journey. And that's what we hope to illuminate to them, because we've kind of pinpointed this throughout the years that we've been doing this, and seen where customers who are way ahead of the curve in their automation have run into this problem. And they end up getting to a point in the do-it-yourself mentality that's like, hey, this has become way too complicated. Is there a platform that we can invest in that basically now makes that much more simpler for us to now just focus on building automations? Because at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. You want to automate your network, different domains, and the systems that you must interact with in order to provide a service or an application to a customer.
So, Rich, I think that's a fantastic point, and I think one of the notes I made, kind of as you was talking, was that we've talked about already, kind of this year, 2020, and how the demands on the network have changed. And I think what's really interesting is, yeah, absolutely, the demands have changed, and the enterprise's need around the technology stack has changed. That we want things more rapidly, we want things kind of on demand, because that's what we've got used to. And all of this is making the networking infrastructure team's life much more complex as it goes. So not only are we dealing with our data center networks and our wide area networks that we know and control, we're also starting to do this thing in this lovely thing that we all like to call the cloud, which comes with its whole bunch of networking challenges. And not only networking challenges for one cloud provider, but if you're doing stuff in Azure, you're doing stuff in AWS, you're doing stuff in Google, you're doing something in IBM, there's a whole bunch of different technologies and ideas that you need to kind of pick on. So because I actually wasn't going to ask this initially, but kind of as you was talking, it made me think about it. So when we talk about integrating cloud in with this, what are some of those kind of challenges that cloud presents that maybe you've seen it with your experience that people have maybe struggled to grasp and get to grips with?
Yeah, we've seen plenty of that. Well, on a smaller scale, as organizations, as enterprise started deploying things into the cloud, the networking was really super simple. And kudos to Amazon and Azure and all the cloud providers for making it that simple. You had, we'll use AWS as an example. You had a VPC, which acts kind of as a switch, kind of as a router, but to a non-networking person, it's just how I connect all of my virtual machines together. To a networking person, that was they didn't even need to be involved in this conversation, because AWS made it easy to click, and it gives you a subnet, and it all comes up. It's all automated. But what's been going on is, now that we've seen more and more deployment into the cloud and multiple clouds, to your point, networking people have now had to come into this conversation. They're being asked to have a seat at the table finally, but they're being kind of clubbed over the head, and it has been part of this cloud conversation. And as they start investigating very specifically how, let's say, some cloud native network services in AWS operates, it's a completely different way. Like, there's no CLI, right? It's point and click. So how do you troubleshoot this? If you can figure out how to troubleshoot it, it doesn't operate the same way as you expect. And so there's this whole new criteria of trying to learn and understand these new concepts that operate kind of sort of like a network, but completely different. And so that's this weird dichotomy of what they have to learn. And then as these the cloud network, scales out, you have things like, how do we connect how do we scale out our VPCs to connect together? That becomes complicated. And how do we do multiple on-prem connections, through VPNs or other things? And now you're tying them together with like things like BGP, which network guys absolutely understand. And so now they're being brought in to say, hey, help us understand what's going on with this routing, with BGP, how we connect all these things together. And so on one hand, it's very complicated for them. But on the other hand, at least they're getting a seat at the table, and they're starting to have this conversation with folks who have already been in automation and developing automated, and that's the world they're living. And I think that's what we've needed. We've needed to have networking folks get exposed to this to understand that other point of view. But how do we enable these guys to start to work in that environment as quickly as possible?
Well, I think that's a great point. We'll kind of pick up on that in a second. But I just want to, so to the note I made there, while and I love this phrase. I'm going to steal this, Rich, if it's okay.
Okay.
But that idea when we look at public cloud is that it looks like a network, but it's totally different. That is just what you need, isn't it, as a networking guy? Oh, look, it looks like a network. Oh no, it's totally different. So I need to now get to grips with that as well. So I think that's a great phrase. And I think all these challenges come along with the idea of organizations are demanding, and actually our networks are growing at scale and at speed, and we're trying to address all of these kind of problems, all of these challenges in the context of at speed, at scale, and actually through 2020 trying to deal with this in this kind of whole brand new distributed way of working that so many of us now find ourselves in. So and it's something like I say, something you kind of touched on at the end of your answer there. So what kind of things are you seeing in the market now in terms of what are the kind of things that are beginning to change, or maybe what are the kind of things that need to change? So if I'm listening to this and I'm a kind of a networking guy, or I'm involved in my organization's cloud strategy or my organization's networking strategy, more to a point, what are some of the things that I should be thinking of, and some of the changes I should be looking to make?
There's the technology piece of it, and then there's kind of the strategy piece of it. And I think you need to have a strategy as to network automation. So the first thing is it's a critical resource. We can't treat it like we did in the past, where it's pipes and speeds and feeds. It's a critical resource that has evolved and will continue to evolve and continue to be more complicated as time goes on. That's the trend it's been on. There's really no way to see that any other way. It's going to become more and more complicated. And so having an automation strategy to address that is key, because you want to start looking this as multiple domains. Think about a typical service or an application today for a remote user or even an on-site user. How many network domains is that going to pass through? How many systems in order to bring that service up or down? IT systems like an IPAM or a ITSM system have to be integrated into that, or should be integrated to that. And that's the broader view of automation. So the strategy should include identifying the systems that are going to be kind of these different network domains, assuring that they can be automated, and they will. Like network, it's all about APIs nowadays, and all modern controllers and orchestrators and systems will have APIs. So that should be the approach. We need to have, the ability to use the API, leverage those across all of those systems, and a platform that allows us to easily do that. And so that's kind of like the strategic piece. And then the technical piece is there's all kinds of tools. You might have a shop that, that may have a bunch of unicorns. And what we mean by that is, they're networking guys with programming backgrounds. That's rare. That's why they're unicorns. But they're going to use a specific set of tools, right? But most likely you're going to have some balance of really, really skilled networking guys with very little or maybe no programming background. And what's valuable about them is all of that embedded knowledge of how networking works. But what they can't get mired down in is how to become programmers. And so the solution from a technical perspective is leverage the tools that exist all together, and not say there's one way to do it from a single vendor. That's probably not going to happen. And so we're always going to have complicated, multiple tools, multiple groups, and bringing all of that together is the key to the automation strategy. So it's tools and strategy.
Yeah, and I think I've some great nuggets of quotes that you're sharing with me here, Rich, as well. And I think one of those again is about this idea of we can't, if we're looking to modernize the way we deliver things, that we can't do that modernization if we continue to think traditionally in the way that kind of we approach the
Right.
problem. So if we're thinking, and that's true across the entire technology piece. If we're thinking about traditional ways of delivering applications, traditional ways of managing data, traditional ways of kind of managing and implementing, as you've used the phrase a couple of times, the kind of the pipes, the speeds and feeds between everything. We need to think about these things differently, and that idea, and again, absolutely core, I think, to most modernization is that thing you touched on about API driven, because API driven opens up so many possibilities to us. It starts to kind of present a standard way for us to do things almost.
Right.
And I think we talked about cloud earlier on, and it certainly strikes me that kind of API driven philosophy when it comes to cloud is useful. And if you can find tools that abstract some of that difficulty, I think there's some huge value in that, and is that a kind of shift that you're seeing as well? If we can abstract, how important do you think abstracting some of the complexity that underlines some of the networking stuff so that we can present a relatively simple and consistent interface up to our networking team? So is that something you see as an important trend as well?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. You started to see a lot of that, the concept of how do we abstract this through network controllers, that event. So if you're upgrading your data center network, it can probably be controlled with something that same vendor will sell you, and that does a certain amount of abstraction typically to build services and things like that. And so that's key, because as things get more complex, and especially if you have more devices, more network domains, being able to extract that and federate that. And so federating is being able to talk to all these different systems in real time as an automation requires some amount of information, so that you can get the most precise state of a device or a system at that time, so that you can have the most confidence in your automation. And that's key as well. And so API is the enabler for all that. And that's something that that is really critical going forward, that networking teams understand, and not, and again, like, we need to help bring networking teams to the table, because they're not fluent in speaking Python and API. These are foreign things to them. So the abstraction for those guys is probably the most critical for that team, because what we want is we want them to build automations and not focus on all of the other programming stuff. I've spoken to customers who have had to, they're networking guys with a little bit of programming background, and they'll spend tons of time just trying to figure out how to talk to a system, how to get a piece of information from that system, so that they can go back and actually do the automation. And so we want to abstract that and take that out. And anywhere you can abstract and make it easy and simplified to do automation, that's a key component. Absolutely.
And that, for to kind of introduce this and said, obviously we were talking about this kind of networking topic, and I'd kind of been made familiar or aware of what Intential, the kind of space that you guys operate in. We've not really talked particularly about what you guys do right now, so I would
Sure.
like to dig into that a little bit. And
Okay.
so just kind of thinking about what you just said, so is that really Intential's goal, which is to abstract the kind of underlying complexity, so that we can from and from what I understand, it's kind of across the entire networking stack as well. This is not just about managing switches and routers. This is about kind of the across the whole piece, really. But is the general aim, from an Intential point of view, to abstract that kind of complexity, so that, as you said before, that your kind of network engineers can focus on delivery and automation, and you kind of do the heavy lifting under the covers?
Yeah, that is a key enabler and a key component to our solution. So what we've built is a platform that can accelerate automation and deployment and management of network infrastructure across multiple domains. So what we recognize is that in every one of these domains, you're going to have a controller of some sort. From that controller, there's going to be an API available, and we want to integrate with all of these different controllers. If you think of it as tools, right? These are all tools to manage your network. We want to integrate with all of that, and then provide for the network engineer, the network architect, a very easy and simplified view of how to create a network automation across all of these domains. I can drop, low code. We want to reduce the barrier to entry into automation. And but at the same time, the same platform, because it's API first, allows us to integrate with ITSM systems and other IT systems that ultimately should be part of an overall end-to-end automation strategy. if you're bringing up a service or you're taking a service down. And so that also allows other IT teams to come into the platform to build automation specific to particular domains in their systems. And a DevOps team can then also be part of this. And so now we're talking about having a seat at the table for your entire IT team, because what's the end goal? The end goal is to automate across all of the IT domain. That's why a platform is so important. And yes, part of that is abstraction, as part of a key component to this.
So I think that use of the phrase actually platform at the end is really important, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and people who know me and have kind of seen some of the stuff that I've done in the past where with a focus on data, you know, it's kind of the day-to-day job, is I talk about that quite a lot. And I think for very similar reasons, you know, traditionally maybe when we've talked about data, we've talked about the plumbing, you know, we've talked about a data storage, some kind of enterprise array, you know, whoever that might be by. But that's not how you build a data strategy. You know, a data strategy includes a whole bunch of things on top in terms of insight, management, intelligence, automation. And it sounds very much that you guys are taking a very similar approach to that with networking. You know, networking is not about switches and routers. Networking is about management, it's about intelligence, it's about the ability to respond, it's about automation. You know, is that, I suppose, is that accurate? You know, is you know, am I thinking about you guys in kind of the right way there?
No, that's correct. That's correct. So in terms of all of that, yes. As a platform, we want to do as quickly as possible, build integrations, or provide integrations, or even allow our customer to do their own integrations through API tools, so that they're not even relying on us to build the integrations into their different IT systems. We make those open source, we make those available, because we don't want that. To us, it's about velocity too, right? How quickly can we bring a customer into the world of automation once they've deployed our platform? And so being able to download what we call adapters, which are integrations into your network controllers, your ITSM systems, and then at the same time, publishing pre-built automations so that they can do things like, and these are very simple, repetitive tasks for network engineers, software upgrades, you know, turning up ports, firewall rule changes. We make these automations available to them so that they can also download them into the platform and get started immediately. And so, yes, and then making all of the API calls, think of it as a palette where you can now see it reveals all the API calls that have been integrated into the system. So now you can drag them and drop them into a canvas, build an automation from scratch, or download one of our pre-builts and start extending it. And so a network engineer now gets to sit down and take a look at the process that he thinks of. So think about the pre-checks and the post-checks that a network engineer would typically have as part of a process of bringing something up. Now they can start to focus and work strictly on that, and not necessarily on writing code or, you know, which Python libraries do I need to import here and how does all that work?
So I think that, I mean, that last point again, I think it's a really important one because it's that kind of shift on, from a network engineering point of view, thinking about outcomes. You know, it's that focus on outcomes, not focusing necessarily on the nuts and bolts of how it's done, but focus on how we want to get there. And because we've simplified kind of the nuts and bolts. So, well, look, before we kind of wrap up with how people can find out more about Intential, because I think it's, you know, as I say, you know, I kind of got introduced to your technology a few weeks back, and, you know, I think it's an interesting platform, and I think you're doing some really interesting stuff. And I think people who've listened to the show will want to go and check that out. But if we just step back, we started at the beginning talking about some of the challenges that we see day to day and some of the things that need to change. So if I'm watching the show or listening to the show, and I'm kind of heading up my networking strategy, or I'm an IT pro, and I'm looking at some of the networking challenges that we see in whatever enterprise it is I work for, you know, would you be able to give kind of a couple of tips of what are the first things somebody should do if they're looking to modernize kind of the way they approach networking in the enterprise?
Um, that's an interesting question because there's a lot of routes and avenues you can go down. I think what most customers look for as part of, you know, maybe their first steps in automation is updating their infrastructure to something, you know, controller based. You know, perfect example is like SD-WAN. You can't buy SD-WAN without a controller because that affords a certain amount of automation. But what you'll find is that we call that maybe the 8 to 10% problem. In order to bring up a new SD-WAN customer, that's maybe 8 to 10% of the automation effort that could be done. And so having the broad view of saying, okay, this is maybe where we start, but this is not where we end. We end, maybe there's no end, because as we continue to add more systems and things get complicated, but we have to have a way to extend this not only to multiple networking domains, but then the multiple systems in an end-to-end process. And so that should be top of mind. Again, that's part of the strategy of network automation, is saying, let's not fix just a task. Let's start there and let's move this out, because an application is going to extend to multiple domains, to multiple systems, as part of bringing it up, bringing it down, or just management over time.
So I always like to give people a question where there's 75 different responses that you could have given. So I like the one you've chosen. That's a good response. So well, look, Rich, as we wrap up kind of time wise here, I've said before, I think people probably should go and check out what Intential are doing, because I think some really interesting stuff. So if people do want to do that, they want to find out more about Intential, or maybe they want to come and hunt you down online, what's some good ways they can come and do that?
Well, in order to get more information, our website is probably the first stop, Intential.com. You can email us at info@intential.com, and if you ask for me, they'll find me for sure. If you're interested in how we do things, and especially some of the the adapters and the pre-built automations, go to developer.intential.io. That is our developer website. In fact, we have all of our documentation readily available. We're really proud to be able to expose all of that without any kind of secret passwords or anything like that. So we want everybody to understand like how we work and why we do the things we do. And then from there, you can take a look at our GitLab repository if you're really geeky and you want to check out how we do things behind the scenes. And then Twitter is @Intential.
Yeah, you see, if you've not got a Git repository, you're not even a company anymore, are you? That's it's important we have that. So it's one of those other things. If you're not doing that in technology, you're even in technology anymore. But Rich, I think that's fantastic. I think that's covered a lot of interesting ground. And I think the work kind of your team at Intential are doing is really interesting. But even if people don't see Intential as a solution necessarily for them, I'm sure many of them will. The ideas around kind of the approach and the way that we go about rethinking how we look at networking, I think is hugely important. So thanks for sharing your experience. Really appreciated it. Really enjoyed the chat. So Rich, thanks for being on Tech Interviews, and look forward to having you on again sometime in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that. For show notes, pop over to techstringy.com. We'll also find all of our previous Tech Interviews episodes. And if you've got an idea for a show or would like to propose guests, then why not email me at podcast@techstringy.com. To make sure you catch the next episode of Tech Interviews, and why not subscribe? You can subscribe in all good homes of podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube. Our next show is going to be a couple of weeks away as we take a little bit of time off here at Tech Stringy Towers, but it is going to be our last show of 2020, so I hope you can join us. In fact, to make sure you don't miss it, then why not subscribe? So until next time, thanks for watching.